All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Board of Supervisors to order. As always, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of America,
to the republic which stands one nation
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If the clerk would call the roll.
Supervisor Loffer is present. Supervisor Breslin
Here.
is here. Supervisor Headland is here. Supervisor Score here. Supervisor Steen is here. Supervisor Shackleton is present. Supervisor Gary Bjork is here. Supervisor Wilsey is here. Supervisor Quinn is here. Supervisor Jetson here. Supervisor Bashan is here. Supervisor Kinnear is here. Supervisor Barrier is excused. Supervisor Calabrese, I think, was joined.
I think he's online, but
Okay. Supervisor Lyon. Supervisor Lyon is here. Supervisor Vogel is joining us online.
Yep.
Supervisor Story. I don't know, Supervisor Story. Okay. Supervisor Vandermeulen is here. Supervisor Burnt is attending. Supervisor Morehouse is here. Supervisor Hagan is present. Supervisor Thomas is present. Supervisor Prochnow is here. Supervisor Gilbert is present. Supervisor Larry Bjork is here. Supervisor Bauer is here. Supervisor Wolf is joining us online. Okay. Is present, and Supervisor Hartung is here, and Chair McCullough
aye.
is an aye.
All right, on to the approval of the minutes. I need a motion in a second. Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Is there any speaking to the minutes? All right, seeing none, you have the minutes before you. We are gonna, oh, by the way, we're gonna be trying to get a little more formal in the way we do some of this. We have a lot of relatively new supervisors. We're gonna try and get a little more up to speed on the Robert's Rules side of things. So you have the minutes in front of you. And we are now going to vote on those. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Presentations of petitions, memorials, and other communications. I don't have anything. Chris, do you or Andrew? Nope. All right. Public hearing. We do not have one. Public comment. Do we have any members of the public who are here who wish to speak? All right. We'll get you there in just a second. Go ahead and state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Mike Cooper, E4627 453rd Avenue, Menominee. And I see on the minutes that there is a report on immigration tonight. And this has been something that's been before this group for some time now. But things have changed. And one of the big changes is Washington and funding that is going to be available or not available to this. And I guess in my mind, it would be wise to just put this on the back burner for a while until we find out what kind of money is going to be available, because USAID is getting cut, is going to be cut quite severely, and there's going to be other cuts. And if there are cuts, we're going to end up being the ones holding the tab. The county is $30 million plus in debt already, and immigrants, if you take a look at the history of other cities like Whitewater and others, the financial load is quite a bit. So I would counsel that this is something that should be tabled for a while until you find out what kind of funding is going to be available from Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, we'll be closing public comment. Appointments, you have a sheet in front of you. I would need a motion on the appointment that needs approval, the 2 appointments that need approval, and a second. Supervisor Steen moves, Supervisor Bashan seconds. Again, you have the list in front of you. Any questions or clarifications? If not, then voting on the sheet in front of you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Report of County Manager, Chris.
Good evening. About a year ago, you heard a short presentation regarding the St. Croix Chippewa Valley Rail Commission and their efforts to explore passenger rail service from Eau Claire to the Twin Cities. And it seemed like a good time to give you an update. So I would invite Scott Rogers, who is a part of that project, to the podium to give you a little bit of an update.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, County Manager Corpola, Chair, County Supervisors. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Scott Rogers. I have a few different hats. My full-time job is I am the Vice President Governmental Affairs at the Eau Claire Area Chamber of Commerce. And I come at this from the economic development standpoint. I'm also one of the commissioners on the Chippewa-St. Croix Rail Commission, and it was the commission that I'm here representing tonight, of which Dunn County is a member. I am also on a subcommittee of that commission that's working on the Federal Railroad Administration study that's underway currently. I'm also a commissioner on something called the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission. It's an 8-state commission formed by compact among the upper Midwest states to look at and manage passenger rail services and expansion in the upper Midwest. That was an appointment I received from the governor. And then I also happen to be the chair of the West Central Wisconsin Rail Coalition, which I'll explain in just a moment. And Dan said this would take a minute, so there we go. So a little bit about the Chippewa-St. Croix Rail Commission. It was formed in 2021 by joint resolutions of 9 different entities. So there were the 3 counties of St. Croix, Dunn, and Eau Claire, and the municipalities of Altoona, Eau Claire, Menominee, Baldwin, New Richmond, and Hudson. And the purpose of the commission it has a fairly lengthy purpose, but it basically boils down to advancing the public interest under state statutes to have a rail commission or transportation commission for rail service to the St. Croix and Chippewa Valley regions of Wisconsin. And as the commission was formed, it brought on several other entities to get involved in it. The commission itself invited the Rail Coalition to be a voting member, and then several other important stakeholders or those that would be involved in any passenger rail service are part of the commission now on an ex officio basis and have been very involved. So Union Pacific Railroad, over whose tracks the trains would run, Wisconsin and Minnesota DOTs, the 2 counties in Minnesota, Ramsey and Washington counties. Ramsey County happens to own the St. Paul Union Depot, if you're familiar with that, which would be the terminus initially of the service, the Regional Planning Commission, and then the institutions of higher learning in our region, the 3 UW universities, Northwood Technical College, and CVTC. And we've appreciated that Dunn County has been hosting the meetings of the commission, and then Eau Claire County has been serving as the administrative and fiscal agent. And on the commission, each voting member has a person representing them, and Gary Steen is the member from Dunn County represented on the commission. The interest in passenger rail service actually goes back quite a ways. In West Central Wisconsin. This was actually a map from the late 1990s when Wisconsin was a leader in something called the Midwest Regional Rail Initiative to try to look at an expanded passenger rail system in the Midwest. And one of the things, if you can see it on this map, is that there's just a dotted line up to Eau Claire, which was a bus connection to Toma. And a lot of the community leaders in West Central Wisconsin, as they went to Madison, said, you know, we have a fast-growing area, we have a lot of commerce going on. Why aren't we on the map? And some of the people you see these pictures of, initially, the Rail Coalition was formed as a committee of the Momentum West Regional Economic Development Organization, and it's still associated with it. But you may know some of these names, Owen Ayers, who originated Ayers and Associates, Bill Leinenkugel from the brewery, Ray Willoughby, a regional banker. They've passed on since, but they were farsighted and saw that for the economy of our region, they really wanted to see passenger rail considered and planned for. So why didn't it happen if there was all this interest? And one of the challenges was, until recently, passenger rail service didn't enjoy the same kind of planning and benefits that other transportation forms do. In other words, major projects typically get 80 to 90% federal funding, and that wasn't available passenger rail service until the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was passed in 2021. And this is a chart from the Federal Railroad Administration, a division of DOT, showing the annual appropriations going forward under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it brought that along so that there was substantially more grants and funding available. And then it also created a specific pipeline as to how you would develop a new corridor. So starting with planning and moving on to implementation and planning and implementation. So what happened after the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, they created this pipeline and solicited for corridors for eligible DOTs and other organizations such as commissions to apply to be in the program, to get in the pipeline. And there are several corridors. Jumped way ahead on there. All right. I think we jumped way ahead on my slides here. Just a second. I don't know how that happened, Dan. There it is. Okay. So there are actually 6 corridors in Wisconsin that were accepted in the program, and that's quite a large number as all states are stacked up. So you have the Milwaukee to Chicago Hiawatha, which has already been successful, the Twin Cities to Chicago through La Crosse, which has recently had additional service. But 2 of them that are specifically of interest to our area is Wisconsin DOT applied to have a corridor in the program, Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire to the Twin Cities, which would go through Menominee. And then also the Eau Claire to Twin Cities, which was sponsored by the Rail Commission. Also an extension from Milwaukee to Green Bay, and then Minnesota DOT was the lead on a study from the Twin Cities to Superior, Wisconsin to Duluth. And then this would be a map showing in Wisconsin what corridors are being studied and envisioned for the future. The brown line you can kind of ignore, those are bus connections, but the colored lines are the lines that are being studied for future passenger rail service. And you can see it gets to most of the major cities in the state to be looked at. This is the cover, I think. Here we go. This is the cover of the application that went in from the Chippewa-St. Croix Rail Commission. So the commission itself, because of the great amount of commerce between here and the Twin Cities, applied specifically to be in the program to look at Eau Claire to the Twin Cities at a regional corridor. It was applied for in the spring of 23, received notice that the award was given at the end of 23, and then last summer we got the notice to proceed from the FRA and the funding, and that study has been gotten underway. There's a consultant, HDR, and other stakeholders have been working on it, and we expect this initial study to be completed this spring. So that's in the project planning. I'm going to show you just a little bit more detail on what that is. So these are the 3 steps of the corridor identification and development program that is part of the pipeline, the initial stages of it, really to find out if it's going to work and if you have something. The initial up to $500,000, no local match required. That's the study that's underway right now. And then the deliverable from that is to actually build what's going to happen in the next thing, which is the service development plan. And the good news is that the service development plan is 90% federal funded, and then all future steps are 80% federal funded. So they're very similar to other transportation programs. And the service development plan is really the heart of you figuring out if you have a corridor that's financially feasible, will it create benefits for communities that would be part of it, and whether it'll be a return on investment for any public dollars that would happen to go into it. This looks complicated. I don't expect you to understand all these steps, but this is really where you look at things like what kind of capital you need to improve improve tracks, things like that, what you need to do in terms of how many trains would you run, where would the equipment come from, how many riders would you get, what would the revenues be, and all of those kinds of factors that at the end of this study you say, do we have something to pursue or not? So the next step is that service development plan. It does require a 10% local match or state match, and that will be the next step after that one is done. The governor just released his budget for the state yesterday, and we're still in the process of finding out what kind of funding for the state might be available to continue these studies. He does have numbers in there, which I'm trying to get more specifics on, but the quote from the budget is the governor is recommending funding to support passenger rail operations and ongoing expansion feasibility studies. So a little bit more to come on that, but we should know more soon. The other thing I wanted to tell you about our local study, because it's somewhat innovative and a different approach. First of all, the Chippewa-St. Croix Rail Commission study is not assuming that Amtrak, the national rail passenger system, would be operator. In fact, it is looking at doing a competitive process for hiring an operator to run the service. It also is looking at a different arrangement for working with a host railroad for access to their tracks, and then looking at transportation-oriented development or the economic development that would happen in stations as part of the service and making it worthwhile for communities. So just briefly, these are logos that you probably never have seen before unless you're in transportation. These are 4 companies that are part of a trade association called AI Pro. Each of those organizations currently runs more trains and carries more passengers than Amtrak does nationally. Some of them are international, but they all do it on contracts. So their names are not on the side of trains, but they're very competent, and they say that they can be very competitive and more transparent and possibly more cost effective. Also, different arrangement with the Union Pacific Railroad. They're very supportive of pursuing this. They have capacity on their tracks. They already have tracks that are Class 4 standard, which is a high standard in some of the signal systems you would need. And they're looking at a negotiated access to their tracks by basically paying them a market rate for their use of their line, and in return, they wouldn't require as much upfront capital. So why would we even want to pursue all of this? And it really comes down to the economics and mobility. Normal Bloomington, Illinois is a mid-sized city in that state where they have a service on the Chicago to St. Louis corridor. 10 years ago, they improved their station area, and they've had over $200 million in investment around there, and it's been a boon to their city. We also want to look at, well, is it measurable? Is it worthwhile having passenger rail service? And if you'd heard, a new service called the Borealis recently started between the Twin Cities and Chicago on the current Empire Builder route through La Crosse. And the estimates for that is that it may cost the state up to $3.5 million a year, but they estimate that it would bring in $25 million in economic activity. And a more thorough study was done recently by the Missouri Department of Transportation, which supports its St. Louis to Kansas City route. And they found that in the investment the state makes of a few $1 million a year, that they get $22 million back in annual tax revenue and $208 million in additional economic activity because of the passengers who use that train. So here in Wisconsin, we had our first expansion in 22 years, that second train that started in May between the Twin Cities, La Crosse, and Chicago. This is the ribbon cutting in La Crosse, and I point out to my folks in Eau Claire and also Ashley here at the Menominee Chamber that the scissors they're using for that ribbon are from the La Crosse Chamber of Commerce, and we want to use our Chamber of Commerce scissors one of these years to have a new train coming through. It has far exceeded its ridership expectations, so giving some credence to the fact that there's a lot of pent-up demand. So one other thing I just wanted to mention briefly is that a lot of my colleagues around the state have looked at the value of passenger rail service, that it can help attract and retain business, provide a friendly alternative to driving, accelerate growth opportunities, and increase tourism. And a number of organizations around the state, business organizations like our local chambers of commerce here, those across the state in places like Green Bay, and Oshkosh and the Fox Cities and others have signed on to that statement. And then a number of businesses that you'd recognize here who have said, we think for our communities, we would really like to see passenger rail service considered in Wisconsin. Also, a lot of education institutions and tourism and affinity. So just sort of the bottom line, if we were traveling to St. Paul, Minneapolis, or Milwaukee or Chicago, Right now, most of us would do this. We wonder what it's going to be like at rush hour, but what if we could redeem our time and use it more productively? And even, it's not just younger people, but older people. I understand this picture at the top left is Menominee in the 1940s, students from Stout going home. And this is a picture from Champaign, Illinois. There are colleges in other communities and other states and mid-sized cities where the trains are substantially used in a competitive aspect for the universities there. It also can bring in tourism, and where you don't have direct train service, places like River Falls, you can also have bus connections that directly connect you to the rail passenger service. So I went kind of fast, hope it wasn't too much information, but the Chippewa St. Croix Commission is has some meetings coming up soon. The next meeting will be virtual, sort of a check-in on where we are with those studies on March 19th, and then right here in the Dunn County Government Center on April 30th, we'll probably have a more substantial meeting as we know more about the study being completed and prospects for funding from the state and other sources. So we appreciate the time to do this, and I guess it's up to you whether we have time for any questions.
Great, thank you so much. I don't see, oh, Supervisor Vandermeulen.
I've heard that the leadership in St. Croix County is opposed to passenger rail development at this time. Are you aware of this, and do you know what the thinking behind it is?
I gave a very similar presentation to the St. Croix County Board earlier this month, and I wouldn't characterize them as being opposed to it. There were a lot of good questions. They are an active member of the commission. Robbie Krejci, their highway commissioner, is a member of the commission. So they are part of it. There really isn't a need to be for or opposed at this point other than we're pursuing the study. So they are very much a part of the commission.
Thank you. I believe that's it. Thank you so
Right.
much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All right, more talking at you. Last summer, Dan and I were at a conference in which it was a fairly large room full of people, kind of a auditorium style. We were kind of on separate schedules. So as the presentation was going on, I texted him, I go, are you in this room somewhere? Because we were hearing a presentation on something called priority-based budgeting. And it really resonated that it was something that we had looked at here, or I had looked at here when I first came on board, but it was extremely labor intensive. And I think you'll understand why in just a moment. So we came back from the conference. We asked the company that has the software that would help us through that project to give us kind of a demonstration. They did some preliminary work with our data, and then they gave us a price. And originally we said, no, that was too much money. But in reconsideration, we wanted to bring it to you to see whether it was something that you would find interesting. So Dan has a short PowerPoint to share with you what is priority-based budgeting and what our thinking is about how it might be useful to this group.
Yes, and there's also a staff report in your packet that explains some of this in a written form. If you had a chance to look that over, and just a heads up that there is a later action item that will talk about the funding for this. So right now we're just going to explain what that is. So priority-based budgeting, Chris had kind of talked about how we had gotten down this path. So our current budget model, as you're all familiar with as you've been through this, is we really look at things from a departmental level and a line item. So you're looking at how much did we spend on paper last year versus how much are we projecting to spend on paper this year in this department, which is useful information, but it doesn't really let you get into the details of the county government and what we are providing. So and we're focusing on expenses, and like I said, obviously the priorities of the county aren't necessarily taken into account as we're just looking at departments. So priority-based budgeting kind of changes that around, and obviously as the name implies, it's based on priorities. But one of the big things that it does is it breaks down the county into the different programs that the county provides. So this is at a much smaller level as you look at a single department may provide 100 different programs. So we look at each of those individual services that the county is providing and evaluate that based on how much we spend on staff or based on how much we spend on supplies in that particular area. And then we're going to look at how that aligns with the priorities of the county and how that also aligns with the mandates and the different statutes that apply to many of the services that we provide. So we're going to take all of those different things in order to look at each of the individual services. So I won't read this slide to you, but AI had a part in it. And this just kind of explains a little bit about what I was just explaining is that we're going to look at things at that prioritizing the programs and how they're funded. Moving along. So how do we get started? So this is really the big piece as Chris was talking about, as we originally look at priority-based budgeting, we need to identify what all of those programs are. And that is no small task. And obviously that doesn't mean that our department heads don't know all of the services that they provide, but you have to be able to look at all of those services and define, is this a service? Is this two services? Is this one service, or do I need to combine these other two things in order to make one service? So how do we really kind of get a baseline for what a service is and make sure that we're doing that equitably throughout the entire county so that we're comparing apples to apples as we go through that? And then also, how are we able to compare this with what other counties would consider a service? Because that gives us a great ability to be able to benchmark our services versus theirs and to be able to identify how other counties are doing the similar work that they do. So there's a lot of work in that, and we have a lot of department heads that have plenty on their plate, and the budget process is quite overwhelming to start with. So as we look through this, it seemed a little daunting, and that's where we look at this software provider to be able to help us in being able to bring out these programs and be able to identify what they are throughout the county. So now, once we've identified what all of those programs are, now we need to identify the metadata or the individual data components of each of those programs. So you can break this down, and this is a sample from the, I'm sure everybody can see it, a sample from the company that we're working with. So you're going to identify the total cost of that service. You will identify how much of that is personnel cost, how much of that is non-personnel cost, and then they'll align that with some of the priorities of the county and the mandates and other components in order to kind of give them a score and categorize them into different components or into different areas. So that data then will help us be able to look through the hundreds and hundreds of programs that the county has and say, where should we get started, right? That's really what a lot of that scoring is all about. It doesn't mean that this is that or the other. It's just, here's an area where you should probably start looking first. So this is also another screenshot of some sample data from the company that we had worked with. So I talked about being able to put those different programs in different areas. So this is what it looks like. You can see there's 4 quartiles, and inside of those quartiles are 4 more quartiles. So a lot of data. And if you can't really see that, but over in the lower right-hand corner, these are higher cost programs that have a low impact. So as we've looked at that in alignment with our priorities and we're looking at costs, this is a high cost, low impact program. And then inside of that area, you also then see the reliance, so the number of people in the community that are using that service, and then you see the level of mandate. So there's one of the corners down here is low impact, high cost, no or low mandate, and low reliance. So this is a high-cost program that people aren't using and that the county doesn't necessarily prioritize. Total amount there, $6 million. This is not Dunn County data. This is somebody else's data. But that gives us an area that says, hey, there's $6 million here that we can look at. Let's look at what these programs are. How are they funded? Who's using them? And what are the choices that we can make to move forward? So as we talked to the company about this, and this was as they originally did priority-based budgeting, this is what they did. They said, here it is, here's $6 million, go see what you want to do with it. They bring it to a board, and the board says, yeah, let's just keep doing it. And so it didn't really solve the problem of being able to look at your budget and identify what it is that you want to do. So they moved along with that to say, why don't we help these boards identify what are some good options that you have with these specific programs? So this is some sample data that comes along with one of those programs. This particular data is Marathon County in Wisconsin, related to their garbage service. And so you can see they had a $47,000 program that had $2,000 of external revenue, so people fees and other services that came in. And it gave some insight that you could expand your recycling services to the public. And they provide a case study from Outagamie County, another Wisconsin county, on how they had gone about changing the way that they did this and the successes that they had. Next insight is a pay-as-you-throw program, which looked at how Waukesha County had managed the same area. And then in the end, they identify an opportunity to thrive for $26,000 of additional revenue. So again, thriving for an additional $26,000 of additional revenue is saving $26,000 to be repurposed in some other program within the county. So these would be options that would be brought to the board to be able to look at these different areas and say, you know what, that makes sense. That's something that staff should pursue. So I talked a little bit about the doing it ourselves versus buying a solution. So obviously there's a lot of staff time that goes into this, and this doesn't mean that staff won't have to be involved. The intent is that this software is going to use all of its magic to look at our budget and identify the programs that it suspects that a county in the state of Wisconsin would be providing based on the departments that we have and based on the amount of staffing that we have and the data that they have based on other counties in Wisconsin. I believe it's 8 other counties in Wisconsin. I don't know all of them, but I know Washington County, Marathon County, and Winnebago and Outagamie have all done that. So there's plenty of data out there of Wisconsin counties and how, and the program setup that they have. So the intent is they will provide us that information and they'll break that down with our budget, and department heads will now have a starting place to say, these are programs that you likely have. This is probably the amount of funding and how that funding applies to those areas. Now, you go in and look at that and say, no, actually, we don't provide that program. Or, yes, we do provide that program, but that funding isn't right. I only have 0.1 FTE on that, not 2 FTE. And to be able to make some of those adjustments, and then we'll have that final data out and available for you to be able to evaluate with minimal staff involvement. Now, along those lines, the software is also not free. So that's the main reason that we're here. And once again, like I said, there's an action item later to request some funding to be able to purchase that software in order to use it for the building of our 2026 budget. Yes, it's that time already. So are there any questions?
So I'm going to add a tiny bit of context. One of the very first things that I did when I came on as county board chair and was talking with Chris about how we were going to go forward is we need to educate, we need board education. We need to be able to tell you how our budget works and show you in very clear ways what we're doing and why we're doing it. And one of the things I said to Chris is like, do we have a matrix that tells us what we are mandated to do and how much that costs? And it turns out that's a much, much harder question to answer than you would think when you asked it. So we've been going back and forth on this, trying to solve this problem for coming up on 3 years now. And this offers us a chance to solve that problem and to be able to give all of you much better data about how our budget works, how we are spending our money, where our money comes in, what's mandated, what's not. So I think this is a great data opportunity. So that's me giving a little bit of context. Supervisor Vanderbulen.
It strikes me that assessing the impact of a program might be pretty difficult, and one way of doing it might be quite different from another. One of the things I noticed up there, for instance, was art therapy. I guess it was connected with the jail or something. And I think it'd be really hard to assess the impact of art therapy. You might not be able to do so for years, you know?
Yeah. And I would tell you, this is the jail and this is actual Dunn County data. Department heads haven't looked at it. I don't know if we provide our therapy in our jails. But that was one of the insights there. And that's certainly part of the work, right? Is identifying, you know, what is the value that provides. And that is, quite frankly, I think a lot of the responsibility of the board is to identify how much you think or how much impact you think or how much value you have in those areas. I think the intent of this is that we're going to bring it out to you so that you know that program exists and how much it costs. One of the examples that they had provided in the presentation that we had, can't remember what county it was. I think you said it was in Florida. There was an aerobics program that they were providing at one of their parks, and it cost, I want to say like $100,000. And they looked at the impact of that, and it had a total of 5 people using it. And the board ended up looking at that, and obviously it brought it up. So this is pretty expensive for the for the impact that it's having. And the board was able to look at that and say, you know what? Those are 5 people in our city. This is for a city that actually had a program that they like to do, and the board chose to continue to fund it at those numbers. So it isn't saying that you have to do it, but it's bringing that out so that you know that it exists and you can make a decision based on the will of the board.
Well, and I will note with that example, when they were talking about it, they said, okay, this is what it costs. These are the people it impacts. Are we doing this in the most efficient way possible? Is us providing this at the park the best way to do this? Or, for example, we have some local fitness centers that do similar things. Can we give these 5 people or however many people want to be involved in the program a voucher to do it this way at a much cheaper cost? And like Dan said, they chose to maintain it the way that it was. But one of the things that this does is it gives you the opportunity to look at that data and decide, and this is the board that's going to be doing that, decide whether these impacts are reasonable for the costs. And I am much more dubious about their impact study than I am about here's all the things you do, here's how much it costs. I think that by itself is quite valuable. The impacts I'm a little more dubious about.
Yep.
Supervisor Burnt.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess what I'm gathering from this is something like this would help optimize doing budgeting and the constant mulling over of certain line items that may or may not really be significant at the end of the day, or we have any real say over because it's mandated or whatever. That like this, I mean, not even just for us as supervisors, but for departments to be able to look at their own budgets and be able to analyze what they're doing so that they can come up with their budget to present to us in a more optimized way. If I'm understanding correctly, that's what this seeks to achieve.
Yeah. Yes, I would agree that's. I think we'll be surprised by the value that department heads have in kind of seeing what they probably have a level of thought in their head, but anytime you actually kind of put those numbers out there, sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't think about that.
And I think I'm gonna just go ahead and talk a little more here. Back in, I think it was 2015, we did a budget prioritization exercise. And it was not, I think, particularly useful. It gave us some information, but we were rating things that we have to do. There, that's not a budget priority, that's mandated by the state. We shouldn't be having this conversation. And it was rating things that pay for themselves. This isn't really part of our budget discussion. This is a unit, and there's no reason to be talking about that. What this does is it allows us to actually look at the things that we have control over and that are costing us money, and to do our prioritization within that space as opposed to within the complete space of the county, including stuff that's mandated or stuff that pays for itself. Supervisor Thomas. Oh, sorry. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my quick comment, because you have other folks have spoken about what I was going to bring up, but to me, it's going to provide information that we don't have to do, that we can discuss and make decisions on that with more clarity. Correct?
That's certainly the hope.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Thomas. Supervisor Bashant.
So for the timeline for this, so would we be able to get the information back from the company and have everything implemented in plenty of time for budget this year as well?
That is the plan, yes. That we would be able to do that. So typical timeline, I don't think we've approved the official timeline, but the typical timeline for departments to start working on their budget, we'll get a call out in May at some point, typically due like the week after the 4th of July. So that's when departments will start doing their work. But as some of you may be aware, we're already submitting information for the capital improvement plan and doing a lot of the other work. So yes, our budget season does begin on January 1st, when we start work on the 2026 budget. So we are underway in that, but the hope would be we would get this data back in short time. They do have a copy of our 2024 budget, so this is where some of that sample data came from. They just won't give us access to the system until we pay them. And then we'd be able to get that, have department heads almost immediately kind of start working on the validation of that, and giving them a month or two to be able to kind of tweak and change that as necessary. So,
And it says it's the one-time cost, but will we be able to use it repeatedly for future years?
yeah, so the data that we get out of it would be data that we would be able to continue to use going forward. There would be, we can continue to pay them year in and year out, and they'll reevaluate our budgets going forward. My thought is that we're going to get enough data back in year one that we'll be able to kind of work through that same bit of data over time. The changes will be, if you make a change to one program, that program changes, the other ones are pretty much going to stay the same, and those opportunities would not necessarily change. But the opportunity to buy that in future years, if we wanted to get new, so some of the observations that I had shared where they're looking at different counties and what they have done, that's any new ideas that people came up with, we wouldn't have access to those in future years if we didn't pay them, but we would have the data that we got this year.
Supervisor Vandermeulen.
Has this option been presented to department heads? And if so, what's their response to it?
We have introduced the topic, and we did say a couple of years ago, we did a level of this where we identified programs. Department heads have not seen this, or they've seen bits of it, but not all of it. I think I expect that there will be some questions related to how that goes. I mean, it's a challenging item, right? I think we are talking about the budget and how that goes. I think we all know what it is that we're talking about. But I think that there is a great opportunity to advocate for programs and to get that information out. And I think my thought is the pure inventory of programs when it comes out is going to be kind of mind-boggling to all of you and even to us, even to staff, to be able to see that. And I think that that's an important thing. We talk a lot about all of the services that we provide. And I think just having that list is going to be a great thing to just say, these are all the things that we do. But yeah. So
Supervisor Hagan.
Thank you. Did you say what the average cost savings was from other counties or other entities yet? Has that been like a percentage wise or what?
So their assertion, which I am not entirely confident in, is that they could potentially give us 17 to 24% of our budget as reasonable reallocation. I think that's unlikely, but if they can give us 10% of what they promise, that'd be like 1.7 to $2.5 million that we could potentially be spending in a better way. And that would be huge. Supervisor Burnt.
Thank you, Chairman. So I guess what I'm also hearing is that this could very well make budget meetings a little bit speedier because we're only talking about.
I wouldn't bet money on that.
I doubt it.
But we can
But
be
there's the
hopeful.
potential for it.
Yeah.
Since we're only discussing things that we actually have say over instead of, again, nitpicking on things that we might not be able to really change.
yeah, I think that looking at it from a program level will allow discussions specifically about that program. Whereas if you say, cut this by 5%, it's a very challenging request for any department to be able to look at that. And it maybe not because they can't cut 5%, it's you have where, in some cases, that means what program do you not want to do? Because you can't take little bits off of every program for the most part. And I think that's the big thing, is to be able to identify those specific things. And especially when you look at mandated programs, you can't touch those. So when you say 5% of a specific department, can't touch that, can't touch that, can't touch that. So it's this one. Is that really what you wanted to do? And I think that's what this will help you do, is to allow the supervisors, actually see what it is that's happening and make that decision.
Awesome.
Okay, I think that's it, Dan. I'm gonna use this opportunity to provide one small bit of context more. We have been examining our processes, and you'll note that we have this as reported to the county manager essentially as a discussion item, and then we have it again as an action item down below. And that's because there's a lot of stuff we do that's challenging, and we want to give people the opportunity to have a discussion about it and to be informed and have some time to think about it before they're necessarily taking the action item. So we're trying to make everything a little cleaner and a little easier. And part of that is Chris and Dan have been going back through, looking through past records, trying to find certain information about various programs. And as it turns out, sometimes the minutes of our committees are, I'm going to say, somewhat less clear than we would like them to be. So we're adjusting our processes so that it is much clearer what we have done, so that future boards have that information available. And also it's much clearer what we have done so that taxpayers can go, hey, what are they doing? And they can go look and actually find out what's going on. And so that's why this is on the agenda. This is why we have it here and then down below as an action item. All right, thanks, Dan.
All right, purchase orders over $40,000. Any questions? Again, Beata's doing a great job of giving some explanation, but if you have any questions. All right, ERP procurement update. I was supposed to sign it today and I just realized I didn't, but we have a negotiated contract with one vendor and the other one in the works, close. And for our new ERP system. And we are currently working with our current system to see how helpful that they will or won't be, to see whether we can begin implementation of the timekeeping piece of the system that we're purchasing from one company sooner than later, but that's to be continued. So that project is moving along. Once we have a signed contract in place or contracts in place through full implementation, will probably be roughly a year to get all of that accomplished. So they're long projects. And then lastly, almost 3 years ago, when I took this job, shortly before that, some of you weren't, or a number of you weren't on the board at that point in time. Shortly before that, or in the preceding years and months before that, there had been a lot of high-level turnover in leadership in the county. Most closest to when I took the job, we had a new CIO, Chief Information Officer, a new HR Director, a new Chief Financial Officer, clerk,
Highway
treasurer,
commissioner.
highway commissioner. Anyway, there were a lot. I had been with the county for about 20-ish years at that point in time. And what I said in my application process was that I hoped to be able to, where I selected, to provide a bridge from that experience of all of that change, having some institutional knowledge and some historical context, having been with the county for a long time, to provide a bridge to get some of those new folks an opportunity to get some experience under their belt here in Dunn County. And so that has been accomplished. We have an amazing team across the board of senior management and department head, senior management, and our kind of internal leadership group. And so I'm going to officially tender my retirement, and I will be done sometime probably in August. I'm going to meet with the Wisconsin Retirement System in April to get a final solidified date, but wanted you to know that I'm going to move on to greener pastures. Although, if you've been reading my weekly emails, you'll know that we came up with a great slogan that the pastures might actually be greener here in Dunn County. So, that announcement was made to the executive committee last week, and in the at the March executive committee meeting, they'll make some decisions about how to move forward with regard to the recruitment and the filling of this position, with the goal of maybe getting some crossover a month or so, if possible, between the time that someone else new comes on board and I make my way out the door. It has been an amazing experience, and I have absolutely loved working for Dunn County from the beginning. But I'm ready to do some other things. So that being said, any questions about any of those things? All right, with that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chris. We are going to miss you. I am genuinely tempted to say, take me with you. There it is.
I think your wife.
Yeah, she would. She's like, out the door? Great. Yes, we have appreciated you greatly. You've done wonderful work. We are not allowed to keep you, so I can't suggest that. Moving on to item 10, reports of departments, circuit court, your honors, Katie. I don't know how you're all sorting it out.
Well, I laid awake in bed at 3 o'clock this morning and I wasn't going to do a PowerPoint presentation. And then now I have one because I decided that we needed to have some images to look at. So I'm Katie Shelley. I'm the clerk of court in Dunn County. We have all 3 circuit court judges with us this evening. Between the judge's office and the clerk of court's office, there are 25 employees. The judges and the court reporters are state employees. The rest are county employees. We do have a court commissioner, circuit court commissioner, who is a contractual employee with Dunn County. That is Attorney David Schoenberger. When I look back at 2024, I think, wow, it's been a really busy year, or it was a busy year. We had so much training, cross-training with our staff members. Myself and our office manager partook in the work groups for the new ERP system for Dunn County, and it just went by so fast. I'm so proud of all of my staff for their hard work and dedication to make sure that everything didn't fall by the wayside, making sure that everything got done in a timely, timely duties. Looking ahead at our revenue, so 2024, we had a really good year for revenue collections. Good or bad, however you want to say that. I never think of the courts as a revenue generating company or business. We received 13% increased funds compared to 2023. As you'll see, we had a little over $400,000 in our bank account at the end of 2023 and over $800,000 at the end of 2024. Why might that be? So the clerk of court's office, we're required to collect all of the circuit court costs that come through the court system. So when somebody gets a speeding ticket and they want to pay us right away before their court case is up, we hold that money until the conclusion of their case. So there might be times that we hold on to money for weeks, months, or years. For example, as of this week, we have over $500,000 sitting in our bank account for cash bonds. So we have some cases with high cash bond values and some with lower amounts, but it might take the cases 18 months to close or 2 years to close. Good news for 2024, we received over $22,000 in interest from the bank account. That all went back to the county for income. Looking at our collections by our collection agency, we received over $68,000 from the tax intercept program. That was a 56% increase from 2023. And our state debt collection, we've been leveling out around the mid $300,000 for the last couple of years. We did have a 14% increase in revenue collections for last year, so that is really good for victims. Our case filings, this is really hard to see on here. I apologize. I think the written report reflects a lot better, but there was almost 12,000 cases filed in Dunn County for the circuit courts last year. That was a 7% increase overall. There was over 9,448 hearings heard by the circuit court judges and the court commissioner. And then there was an additional 7,000 traffic forfeiture and juvenile ordinances cases that were either just held by the clerk of court's office, the district attorney's office, or scheduled on the judge's calendar that maybe the person didn't appear before the court commissioner or the circuit court judge. Our jury trials for 2024, it was a record-breaking year. It was the most amount of jury trials that we had since 2017. There were 16 trials. They lasted for 44 days. One big thing that when I became a clerk of court is I wanted to reduce the number of jurors that received a jury questionnaire. For a long time in our county, we had a really large overcall rate. So we would send out over 3,000 questionnaires, and that's been a big goal of mine is like, let's reduce that. The most people in the community, they don't want to do jury duty service. It's one of their least favorite things to do. So why bother them if we don't need them? So recently we've been trending downward for jury trials. So I've been trying to bother less people. So in 2024, we sent out over 1,500 jury questionnaires. That was a 34% reduction since 2018. So each year I keep trying to reduce that number. Postage is high. Nobody likes stuffing envelopes anymore or receiving the mailings from our office. So we try to reduce that. After we went through the jury questionnaires and we sent summons out, there were 967 jurors that were available to serve on a jury in Dunn County. We brought in 645 jurors. 441 of them were questioned in the box by the judges and the attorneys. And then 199 served on the jury trials. So not too bad of an overcall rate. We'll still try to keep that number a little smaller each year, but we're working on it. So I'm very happy with that progress. Our interpreter usage. So Judiciary and Law Committee and the County Board has heard me talk multiple times. We use interpreters a lot. We used an interpreter over 340 times in Dunn County last year, 15 different languages. Highest language was Spanish, next was Russian. We are required to use interpreters for all circuit court cases. So we can't just use Google Translate on our phone, and it has to be a state certified interpreter. The bad problem is there is no statutory requirement on what interpreters can charge. So they can charge $500 an hour, $50 an hour. We're at their mercy. We have to have it for court, so we end up paying for them. Looking at our budget overview for 2024, middle of the year, I was really nervous. I'm like, oh my goodness, we're spending way too much money, but it was mandated programs or services that we had to have interpreters for, guardian ad litems, court-appointed attorneys, but we ended up doing really well at the end of the year. I'm happy to report we're about $120,000 in the black for 2024, so that is good. For 2025, so we're going to continue to keep working hard. The judges are going to start ordering court-appointed attorneys for juvenile cases for the parents if need be. Judge Wagner is taking over treatment court from Judge Peterson, and the clerk of court's office will still continue to collect fines as needed, manage the jury trials, working hard, providing access to the courts. Are there any questions?
Supervisor Laufer.
Yes, I was just curious, is it possible for Dunn County government to put a cap on the amount that interpreters can charge within our county system or not?
That's a very good question. I might defer to Corporation Counsel about that. I know that it's not a statutory requirement that there's a rate.
I'm good. Okay. We could attempt to, however, I think it's part of it. It's just the need to have an interpreter available. So you go with the lowest bidder that you can find who's qualified. And I could make an attempt to see if I could, I know in the past, we were able to find certain services or certain organizations that would offer set rates at my past job. So I could make an effort to try to find services like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Laufer. Supervisor Larry Bjork.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I keep hearing every once in a while about how appearances are made by Zoom. I'm sure that doesn't work with a jury trial, but I mean, you must have a number of cases or where the opposing counsels appear by Zoom. I mean, how does that rack up for you for your numbers?
Yeah, as far as interpreters as well, is that what you're referring to?
Well, I suppose, yeah, them
Yeah.
and also, for whatever there might be the issue about where attorneys don't have to travel, they can appear by Zoom.
Yeah, the majority of our court hearings are conducted by Zoom, so the attorneys and pro se individuals are allowed to appear by Zoom depending on the type of hearing and the branch they're before. And I would say probably 95% of our interpreters do appear remotely by Zoom as well. So we're not having many of them come in person. It's just the fact that we have had the volume. Over 340 cases needed to have an interpreter at some point. That gets to add up really quick. I don't know if judges, do you want to comment any more on that or add to it?
Thank you. Supervisor Bashand.
If you have two parties in a case that both need an interpreter, you then need an interpreter for each?
It depends. We have been sometimes, we've used just one interpreter for both of the parties. Any hearing lasting longer than 2 hours, we're required to have more than one interpreter. So for example, jury trials or like a half a day contested divorce hearing, we're required to have 2 interpreters for. We have seen very big increases. We've had, I think, 2 jury trials so far in 2024 that we had to have interpreters for. That was about $1,500, for one interpreter. So you're looking at close to $3,000 per trial for those types of things. Anything else?
I am not seeing anything. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right, libraries. Come on up. This is always the high energy part of the.
Well, hello. Um, I'm Lisa from the Colfax Public Library. And starting in my slideshow here, we're going alphabetically. So we have Boyceville first. And do I have to change the, okay. Callie can't be here today, but she did provide us with some information from her library. There were 9,882 visits that Boyceville had during the year. Their circulation was 20,063 books or movies. They had 83 different programs, and they added over 1,000 books, movies, and other new items to their collection. And then these are some pictures from their 83 programs that they had. Just like Colfax, there were lots of children involved. And Callie mentioned that they did have a $25,000 donation from somebody too for their building project. And she said they had their biggest cucumber run ever with 135 participants. So nice to see them, running, being outside. And then I guess C for Colfax, that's our library. We had a very good year. Circulation was similar to what we had last year, but there was a big change in program participation. We had about double what we had the previous year. And we just think, the word's been getting out that we're very children friendly at the Colfax Library, and we have some nice programs set up. So it's great to see everybody use our services. E-materials, e-audio went up by 10%. E-books went down just a hair for us. By far, our largest item for circulation are the physical books. People still prefer them. And definitely children and parents prefer them. Our ebook use for children is very small. So it's just so much more engaging for them to turn pages of a real book. And then our library of things, I mentioned too, that we were able to start with a wonderful grant from the ladies of the community or Women's Giving Circle. That was checked out over 300 times in 2024. So it's really making an impact for people. And we love that because that is health and wellness based. And then I just mentioned that we do 2 story times a week. And today was a story time day. We had 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock story time. There were 12 kids in the morning, 18 in the afternoon. That's our best turnout ever for story time. We're a small library, so that was quite a bit. We do things like Lego Club, lots of little informal drop-in crafts. We had 150 children sign up for summer reading this year, and 70% of them made their reading goal. So we were real happy to see that. Next slide. Just mentioned we added an automated door to our building thanks to a grant from the American Library Association. And we had applied for, we did not get that great big flexible facilities grant. So we're still working on our fundraising to bring an elevator to our building. However, we did this year get a donor who will match every donation up to $40,000. So we're hoping to make some progress there. And then the last slide for Colfax. We started a little free pantry in our hallway. And we did that because a Boy Scout and his parents approached us, wanted a community service project. And this was always something that I had thought of doing because we don't have in Colfax, an actual food pantry that's open every day. We get a pop-up pantry from Stepping Stones twice a month, but I just wanted some kind of continuity there for people, if prices go up, just a little security for people. And even though Stepping Stones has graciously agreed to restock it for us, we have not had to call on them yet because people are donating, people from the community, and people are using it. So we've had a lot of positive feedback about it. People just really grateful there's something like that there, just in case. So that is my little talk.
Hi, I'm Jolene. I'm the director at the Menominee Library, and in your packets, along just a little infographic. This is our annual report for 2024. You'll see some intriguing numbers on one side and then all of the financials on the back side. And then there should also be a little heart next to your thing, but we'll get to that. Across our library consortium, 2024 was a really good year. Lori Roholt, our system administrator, has said that checkout of physical materials is up across, 50 plus libraries in a 10-county area. And the e-content use is also up. Overdrive and Libby have been just phenomenal tools for accessing that content. And the sharing that we're doing among all of the libraries in this 10-county area has also been going up. So people are using libraries still, even in 2025. We have been with our Elk Mound branch for 10 years now, and people love Miss Monica. She has got a rabid following, and kids that come in there and just love the welcome that she gives them in their own community. So we're really glad about that. And there's the outside of our building. I didn't really want to do a lot with the graphics. What I thought might be the most compelling argument for you is to think about your constituents. And all of these hearts that you have at your table are quotes that were supplied by people in Dunn County. Could have been the Colfax library users or Elk Mound or Menominee. And I'm sorry, there weren't any to grab from Sand Creek, but I know that they love the Sand Creek Library just as much. Anyway, these are all personal anecdotes as to why libraries are important. And when we as a system were asked to come together and say, why do you love your library? We in Dunn County represented 20% of all of the letters that were gathered across the system, even though we're maybe, 10% of the circ in total? I mean, we're just, little Dunn County. So a lot of people stepped up and made a point of saying, this is why my library is important to me. So I hope that this connects with you, that these are your constituents today. These people are articulate, they're well-spoken, and they're paying attention to what's going on in their local communities and in local government. I don't know if any of you are concerned about the world today. I don't imagine you'd be here tonight if you're not concerned about the world today. But something that's been resonating with me lately, and where did she go? The Supervisors online, Ann Vogel. This was an author that she brought to my attention. His name is Richard Kite, and he's a sociologist at Viterbo University in La Crosse. He wrote a book about finding your third place, and he has studied the unraveling of our social fabric for years and years and years. And frankly, friends, it's just terrifying to me. I'm only in my 50s, and I've seen this deteriorate. For those of you that have had more life experience than that, it'd be scaring the pants off of me. You think about club membership, people's engagement in civic, things that are happening, church membership, service organizations, it's all going down. And it's these wonderful little devices that we all carry and pay a lot of money for every month that seem to be driving us away from one another. But it got me thinking about public spaces. And if I could just take a minute to read about some of these insights about the neglect of public spaces and what happens. It's a problem because whether we want to admit it or not, we are dependent on one another, and we can't always count on others to agree with our interests. We need places to work out our thoughts about how to live together. Whether we're talking about a household, a community, or a country, living together well is not just a matter of getting the rules right. It is not just negotiation. It is conversation. That means we need to talk to one another and listen to one another. We must participate in a shared public life. And watching you all in action has inspired me to no end, because I know you're not all thinking exactly the same way, but you have the ability to listen to one another and respectfully disagree and talk through difficult situations. And if we don't have public libraries and spaces like public libraries for the next generation of leaders and constituents to learn how to behave in civilized society, I don't know. I'm scared, friends. So I hope that you will continue to support libraries the way that you have. You all know that they're important. The people that visit our libraries are the ones that are voting and caring about what's going on locally. So thank you for your support in the past. Thank you for the incredible work that you do and continue to do. And just remember that libraries are kind of holding us all together. It's a little, little sketchy, but the wheels haven't fallen off the bus yet. So keep up the good work.
As you can see, I'm Shelley Ray. And I know Jolene handed you a graphic. I'm just getting into how to make slides. So, in fact, I didn't even get this one completed. My daughter did. So I got frustrated and walked away. So a little bit about us. Most of you have probably not seen the inside of our library or even our library building. The bottom left is inside our library. It's an old classroom because the building we were in used to be the old school. Sand Creek Arts and Theater Corporation, a nonprofit in town, bought the building from Chautauqua School District. In that building now, we have a quilt shop, their second space and where they hold classes. We have an online resale shop. We have a post office, and we have the library. Our library is only 840 square feet. So you could fit quite a few of us in this room. We have our summer program, and that's a picture from summer, and so are those also. Even our librarians get into the fun, as you can see on the bottom here. This last year, we did a lot of projects and craft items for the kids. They took home lots of things. And what they're doing in the bottom picture is they took a water bottle and cut it apart, rubber banded a sock to it, and then dipped it into bubble solution to see how long bubbles they could get. They had strings of bubbles. So, and Robbie Joe apparently got one also. The top picture up there was one of the games that we played. We get a little creative with our games. That's a game of spoons. And if anybody has ever played it, it can get rather wicked. You know, when you hear or find a certain card, you're supposed to grab a spoon as quietly as you can. And then the one who doesn't get the spoon is out for that round. Well, we put a different version, different spin on it. And every time they heard a word in a story that I told them, they were to grab the spoons. So they were listening to the stories pretty closely. So just fun, different things like that. We enjoy doing. We have had some interesting programs in 2024. Our traditional program at Christmas time is Ride with Santa. And we had about 150 people this year come. And the kids got to talk to Santa. Some parents did also. And have their picture taken with him. We had horse-drawn wagon rides. One of our local Families has been doing this for years. They bring their horses, they bring their wagons, they take people on a little tour around town, come back. They may be singing carols as they go, you never know. I partnered with ARDC and we did a program on dementia this year for the first time. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, we had the Grinch at Christmas too. He crashed the party this year. And the best thing for the kids to do is to have an indoor snowball fight. It has been a tradition since before I became director. Who knew kids could have so much fun with a wadded up piece of paper and a couple tables laid sideways that they could hide behind? It can go on for hours. We did a knitter and crafter night. We had everybody from experienced knitters to very beginners. Everybody learned how to knit mittens. So that was our one goal. Then we kind of went to whatever craft projects you would like to bring. So we had knitting, crocheting, beadwork, diamond painting was another one that we had. And then sometimes we just sat and talked. Or if one of us didn't feel like working on it, we just visited. So it was a good time to get together and get the moms mainly involved in their community and a craft. Strong Bones was another really good program that we did. There was someone from Mayo Clinic that came, and for 3 months, twice a week, we had an exercise program. Very kind of low key to all different ages and ability. We had 307 people attending for that program. We also did our infamous sourdough program. One of our moms, who is a homeschool mom, makes wonderful sourdough bread. And I was able to talk her into coming and teaching others how to do that. So she was very nervous, but it went wonderful. We had to stop registration at 29 people, and we were full. So everybody got to have their questions answered. They learned about how to do their sourdough, what to do with it. They got to taste some of her samples. And then everyone went home with a jar of starter so that they could continue this on for their families. And our summer library program is, there's some more pictures. They were playing games, pass the hula hoop down the line. They were pretty good at that. And one thing that we've started doing every year is decorating our sidewalks. So we go from our library down Main Street, around the corner to the bridge. And we do this right before our town firemen have their annual fundraising picnic. Last year we got rained out and our pretty pictures did not look so well. But we have had comments about pictures and the kids doing it. And we have businesses that some of them will come out and watch and talk to the kids while they're decorating. So in closing, our tiny little 840 square foot library, we have a total of 8,689 items, including magazines, books, movies, audiobooks, and we are getting started with a library of things. So we'll have that coming up. Our public Wi-Fi uses, 1,900. We have people who will come and sit in the parking lot to use the Wi-Fi. We provided 5,066 items for patrons at other libraries. We had that many books and items from our little library that went out to help fulfill holds for other patrons in our system. our patrons requested 2,223 items from other libraries. So this is just one of the little visual things. They made it at summer program. It's a caterpillar. And he kind of walks around and you can make him do all kinds of things. So programs don't have to be expensive. This is green paper and toilet paper. So thank you very much for everything that you've done in the past for all of us. And thank you so much for what the future is going to bring.
Thank you.
I'd like to make, if you don't mind, a few closing comments before I go. First, I'd like to acknowledge that there's a lot going on the national level right now. Lots of change and therefore lots of uncertainty for people. This makes me consider how important everyone in local government is right now. Whether at the municipal, county, or state level, effective leadership, compassion, experience, connections, and commitment are more important than ever. Because you can help people feel like everything is all right. Through oversight and good management, our streets are plowed, calls for help are responded to, and services keep running. A reliable community structure remains in place. This is a good example and a comfort for everyone. Libraries are part of that community structure too. We help connect people with resources and are a calm and stabilizing presence in our communities. We, along with you, feel a deep responsibility to carefully manage our resources so they stretch far enough. We want to help as many people as possible and enhance the quality of their lives. We are communicators, caretakers of culture and history, and bridge builders. We are with you in the days and years ahead.
Thank you. Any questions? Supervisor Burnt.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess I don't really have a question, but I'd like to thank you guys for all that you do for our communities and for supporting, I mean, really each and every one of us and being there for those who need it. So thank you.
Yep. We're in this together, and it's a really important time right now that we serve.
Supervisor Laufer.
Yes, I want to thank you also as well for all that you do. And I'm really new on the board. I've only gone to a couple of library meetings to sit in on them. And I listened to the ladies that were there as they were discussing the business that they incur doing library work. And I had no idea some of the things that the libraries do for people in the community. One of the things I found out when I was there, and I promised Shelley I would find out an answer to it, which I haven't yet, and I apologize for that, but I actually contacted Andrew and asked him to check into some liability things that, because the library actually checks out some things to people that, and there's nothing wrong with doing it, but some of the things that they check out could incur potentially problems for people, that they could have accidents with those things and stuff. And so I would just, ask the library board in Sand Creek if they had any provision made for liability things on the things that they check out. If there was anything in the county legal system that would protect them from lawsuits from some of the things that they check out to people. We just happen to live in a world today where that stuff does happen. And just to protect the taxpayers of Dunn County, I was just wondering if it would be wise counsel to secure some type of statement that people could sign to waive liability for the county on the things that they check out. And I don't know, Andrew, if you did any research on that or if you contacted our legal counsel to see if, or whatever, and if you could just, comment on that or on what you found out or whatever, I'd sure appreciate it.
Yep, we've been in contact about that and we're hoping to get something to the Sand Creek Library, but also the other libraries boards as well,
Okay.
for them to consider going forward.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
That looks like that's the end of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finance. Come on up, Beata.
Good evening. And thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to speak about finance. This is going, I was trying to change a little bit. I don't know if I can top the library and all the fun activities and fun handouts. I tried some dollar bills, but that didn't go really well with the treasurer's office. But I'll have some handouts that I'll save for later, like in the budget time. So you'll see some coming. On a personal note, as far as the budget presentation that Dan did about priority budgeting, I've been at multiple conferences and very intrigued by that, even though the question was, were there department heads involved? I've been as much as I can and definitely will sign up for anything that's in the future as far as the system goes. So my presentation, I'm going to try to not talk about numbers because we hear that all the time and they don't always can be entertaining. But I wanted to kind of talk about finance. What is it that we do? Ultimately, our vision and what we're trying to achieve is provide that support to all the standing committees, to this board, and also to all the various departments, either directly or indirectly. They're relying on us for the information that they're financial information that they're reporting to you or their standing committees. So ideally is to make sure that that information is accurate, but most importantly, it is timely and relevant. So we're sticking with that mission on an everyday basis. Also wanted to paint you a little picture as to how big. Did you move your slides? Oh, that's mine? Okay, I thought they were just magically going to switch for me, but thank you. Okay. So finance, how we are structured, there's 21 of us, including myself. We gained one additional staff that's doing some backfill as we're working on our new financial system. So we have made some changes in our department because we've gained two new management managers that were fairly new in their roles. We also had a new assistant finance director. So we needed to look to see how we can provide services without overwhelming one another and be able to continue on providing information as timely as we could and as accurate. So as of today, this is how it stands. Our finance director, assistant finance director does oversee staff. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but I just wanted to kind of give you how we try to balance that. So how our services works, I'm going to refer to them as shared services. So even though our finance is what we call centralized, they're all report to the top as the CFO, but we are all over the place. We have presence in the highway. We have offices there that are also working with those department heads. We also have a manager like in DHS, for example. They're 100% dedicated to provide services to the DHS and working with alongside with the DHS leadership teams. Same is true for the highway. We have one person, not one person, but one manager that oversees that financial function specific to the highway. And then we have NDC, which is our nursing home. And we made recent changes for the staff simply because we prioritize what are we going to focus on for the last 2 years that I've been here, a little over 2 years. We've been working on restructuring how we manage fund balances at the highway. That took some work and we're still working on that, but it's important that we have a person that's specifically focused in that area so they're not torn all different directions. And we did the same thing for the NDC. We did some shifting simply because we started doing a 5-year model to see how nursing home is going to do and look out in the future. It was important that we had an individual that was dedicated in that. It's not to say that it might not change in upcoming future, but that is how it is now. So with that, there's some key functions that we do. Of course, budget. We've all our favorite, right? It is my personal favorite. It is. So then there's the accounting and financial reporting. So we report to various bodies. Our auditor, we report to our auditors, which they complete reports and so on. But there's a lot of governing bodies that we need to report to on a federal level and at the state level. Then, of course, finance function is about payroll. HR is the one that manages who gets paid, and payroll makes sure that they do. So it is a shared function that we have with HR because they do cross over. The other one is accounts payables and receivables. We want to make sure all the bills are paid and we make sure that everything is receipted and recorded in our system. And there's the grant management. Grant management is huge. There's over 100 plus grants that we're dealing with. And then there's the audit and then there's the compliance. So what is financial planning all about? We all know budget comes to the very top, right? So annual budget includes some of those typically when we do budget for operations, we do it on an annual basis. We're trying to shift the lens and use it more of a 5-year planning. And this is where I identify as a 5-year CIP. So we've been doing that for some time. Also, the other one is how we're going to pay for all those goodies, all those services, and all the widgets that we need to purchase. So we're looking at long-term financial planning. We're working with third parties or consultants to help us assess our debt and plan. What would our debt need to look like, given considering some of the direction that might come from the board? And also investment portfolio. We have about $26 million, and that's per the treasurers that we work with. And then there's this forecasting. I think forecasting is something that we did 2.5 years ago. That was something that we introduced that was new. We revamped those financial reporting that you see in your standing committee. And guess what? It might probably change once we get the new system, but hopefully the new system will have more of a robust reports. And why do we do planning is make sure that we have all the financial resources and support that's needed. So as far as reporting, why is that important? And again, it really boils down to transparency and then holding finance department accountable. Also to not only the finance, but county as a whole, are we responsible with all taxpayers' money? Are we utilizing and managing all those resources not only efficiently, but are we effective? Because ultimately, what we report, we want it to be accurate. So because a lot of these decisions that are made are based on that information. So payroll processing is not only about who gets paid and how much, but we also have other responsibilities for tax reporting. And then there's benefits and retirement and managing those. So wages make up 45% of our 25 operating budget. So it's a huge expense. So we team up with HR to make sure that we're in compliance. Taxes get changed, we make sure that it's in the system, so it all calculates correctly. So accounts payable, I just want to put a little short stat. You know, we process about 8,600 invoices, but that does not include all the payroll. This is just invoices that we process for vendors. Either they got paid by a check or they got money wired to them via ACH. But that's just for the vendors, how many invoices that we've processed. And not only that, but we maintain the vendor records. And that's also very important because the information that is stored in our system will allow us to make sure that we have legitimate vendors on file, meaning that they're providing additional information that gets validated to make sure that they're a legit vendor. Do they have federal tax IDs? Because that's needed when we issue 1099, which is their form, how much have we pay them so they can pay taxes, if they need to pay taxes. And also all the banking information if it's an ACH. So that's also a critical function because because there can be, I'm sorry, with the ACHs, there's always going to be that risk. So fraud is not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. IT has put in it's putting tremendous work and efforts into firewalls to prevent some of those incidences, but also vetting through our vendors and how their banking information get changed is also important. So grant and medical billing. So we have staff like in DHS and NDC. We have billers. So part of their work is to bring revenue in, billing for the services that were rendered to the citizens. So we have approximately 120 state and federal grants. And in 2024, they brought in about $23 million. So we have medical billers or any other service billings. And that in 24, we were at 35.6 million for the individuals that we have in finance. So I just kind of broke it down. NDC makes up 17.3 million of that. And then there's the highway. Those are also important. Make sure that we get the money on time and that the reports are as accurate so that we get the appropriate refund or reimbursement. So transparency is important because being transparent also translates to are we being accountable? And part of that is building that trust with the constituents. So what we're reporting is can be trusted, or some of the decisions that the board is making, they have sufficient information that's timely, accurate, and how all the money is being dispersed and how that's being allocated and how is that being spent. We also have we also have a website. It's the county website, but we have the intranet, which is internal, and then we have the intern. If you're on the internet on the county, then you have access to the finance department, and that's where we would really. This is where we store all our budget, any audit reports, any historical information there as well. So giving some priorities and goals as we work with the auditors. We completed our P-card policy and procedures, and we also did the training with all the users. We have information on the website to then make sure that we have a solid policy. This has been in the works for some time, but it's out there now. So the next thing would be to looking at additional policies around carry forwards. How are you dealing with them, and budget adjustments? When do we approve them? Do we go every month, or do we do it at the end of the year? So we're exploring and researching some of those options, what that policy is going to look like. Another important one is prioritizes the cash reconciliation. This has come up with our auditors, and we've connected with them on multiple occasions. We formed a weekly group that we're working on that to have this reconciled on a regular basis. So again, it's to streamline those grant reports, how we track them, to make sure that a lot of departments are doing fantastic work, but those heavy users of utilizing those grants would be like for DHS, and I don't mean to pick on DHS, or public health is still looking to see, is everything done and everything claimed correctly? Because if it's reimbursed based on what has been done by whom and what was purchased for that program, so it gets really complicated. Then, of course, is to focus on our ERP chart of accounts, how our new system is going to store all that information so that we can run reports out of. The other one is obviously our culture. This is an ongoing thing for us that we continue to put it as a priority. As a matter of fact, I think I might be moving my office physically a little closer to my staff so I can stand in a doorway and see what's going on. Everything helps, right? And again, that's the last one is collaboration. I think I think 2 years, going on 2 years, finance formed a meeting with the department heads called Discussion and Discovery. And it's all finance really focused. We discover from the department heads what's working and what is not working. With the P-card policy, we'll do some now that the policy is in place. The next step is to test to see as if everything is happening that it should be. And then it will come in the form of report to the department head and ultimately come to the sending committee. We haven't decided that yet, to paint the picture to how are we doing with P-cards? Are you responsible? Those P-cards users are following the policy. So the policy, for example, might say that it needs to have a supporting documentation that justifies that it's county business. So in that training, we've used examples, and we did like a 4 small study, call it a case study, to say, here's what a supporting document, is that enough to tell a story or to justify that it's a county purpose? So part of that review would be to make sure that all those attributes are checking off. And if there are some discrepancies, then that would be reported to the managers and then take action accordingly. This will also let us know if we need to change something in a policy, or maybe something wasn't, clear and it's confusing for the users. We're just going to look for patterns. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
For me? No?
Supervisor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next week, I'm going to be one of the people going to the Wisconsin Counties Association meeting. And when you started talking about reporting, it occurred to me, do you have the ability to take each department and tell us what percentage is state, what percentage is federal, and what percentage is county?
Yes.
I would love that information.
Yes,
for
I
each.
think I saw an email come through, and it was from you or somebody else But yeah, it came from the supervisor.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it'd be great if it was by department, and I don't know if at this point, if I really need the individual things that are funded by it, but I think that it would be beneficial
Just
to
all
have
the
it.
funding sources by department.
Yeah, in other words, what federal money could affect us if we don't get it?
Okay, how much?
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Supervisor Larry Bjork.
Thank you for your report. But every year, I probably sit on my hands and I don't ask the question, and this year I'm going to ask the question. In looking at what you do, it isn't like so many other departments in the county where county employees are interacting with somebody in Health and Human Services or somebody in the highway department. There doesn't seem to be a lot of contact from staff people in finance to the general public. So you can't hardly listen to the news anymore and not hear a discussion come up on how many people come to work and how many people are able to do their work from home. And I don't know, I've never heard the county ever state a policy on what they expect, but there have been times when I visited county offices and I'll ask the question, who's supposed to be sitting in those desks over there? And the question is, most of those people are finance people, and some of them only come to work one day a month. So do you track any of that thing? How important is it for them to come to work with your team building and culture? And, you know, I heard your comment about moving closer to where your workers are, but there's a million good reasons why somebody can do their work from home. But I'd like to know how Dunn County Finance handles that and how you track it and what our policy is.
So right now, finance, we have changed and asked staff to come to the office twice a week. And we've designated Wednesday as being one of them, and the other day they can choose. In addition to that, if they have any other meeting that requires for them to be in person, that they would be in person. We're trying to get people in the office as much as we can, encourage them to come in the office as much as they can. But it's more of a hybrid environment. I do see, you'll see someone in finance on a regular basis. I think those that will once a month are no longer. So how do we monitor? I monitor, one thing I'll comment is based on outcomes. As I said earlier, my staff that we have for billers, even though they might be working from home, but they're bringing in 35% of our reported revenue in 24. So that's $35.6 million in revenue. And there's only a handful of individuals that do that billing day in and day out. And a lot of it can be done remotely, simply because it doesn't require that face-to-face. And the others are, for example, we do have finance staff that works with the general public. It's not like if you were to compare that to the treasurer's office, where it's that face-to-face on a regular basis. But my finance team, like in DHS, they do have interaction. Our customers are not only on the outside, but our customers are also internal department heads and their employees. You're welcome. There's a lot of face-to-face for the nursing home too. Making sure they have ability to pay.
That would appear to be it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Item 11, items placed at the request of the chair. Report from Health and Human Services regarding the refugee resettlement issue. Supervisor Wilsey had requested very formally that we take a look at this, so I assigned it to HHS, which is the appropriate committee. Supervisor Morehouse will now be reporting back on HHS's discussion on the topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably not as brief as you all might like, but bear with me. Couple of points by way of background. Approximately 75 refugees have been or are scheduled to be relocated in Eau Claire with the support of the city of Eau Claire. The Refugee Resettlement Program is authorized by federal law, the Refugee Act of 1980, which is found in Federal Code 8 USC 1522. Resettlement, according to the United Nations, is the selection and transfer of refugees from a country from which individuals have sought protection to a country of resettlement. The goal is to protect the refugees from forced return, to provide them with some rights and a path to citizenship. Applicants have to register, be interviewed, and they are then assigned to a country. The country then scrutinizes the applicant with interviews, a medical screening, and a security clearance. The applicant is then assigned to a local non-governmental organization which determines where refugees will be placed and relocated. In the case of Eau Claire, this organization is World Relief. In response, as the chair has indicated, in response to a request from Supervisor Wilsey to consider the matter of refugee resettlement, Chair McCullough assigned this task to Health and Human Services Board. While there really isn't a standing committee with this as its purview, HHSB would likely have some involvement with this issue in the unlikely instance of refugees being settled in Dunn County. I put this request on our November 21st agenda. It was placed as a discussion item, not an action item, as we had not received any proposal or resolution on which to act. I verified this with the county manager and with the county clerk. The county clerk had earlier received 343 vetted signatures in support of a resolution to put a moratorium on refugee resettlement, but no such resolution had been submitted. The meeting was duly noticed. We had 5 persons providing in-person public comment and 1 email. All were in favor of doing something about refugee resettlement in the county, pausing or stopping. Again, no formal resolution was introduced and hence no action was able to be taken. I also included on the agenda a second discussion item on the board's and the county's authority to act with respect to refugees. In brief, although I will quote for you from these documents, neither the Health nor the Human Services Board nor the County Board have any authority to regulate or restrict refugee resettlement. There is a memorandum from Chair McCullough in your packet, and I quote, Dunn County has no authority over the federally controlled issue of immigration and refugee settlement. Immigration and naturalization fall within the enumerated powers of the federal government. Not only do counties have no authority in this situation, this is a clear constitutional separation of powers issue between the federal government and the states. At my request, Assistant Corporation Counsel Barbara Fagan elaborated on a memo she had prepared on this issue in which, quote, local county ordinances cannot supersede federal law. Therefore, any resolution limiting notice requirements or placement of refugees is non-binding. You don't have Ms. Fagan's memo in tonight's packet. You have a follow-up memo, but I assume that that could be provided, and it's certainly available in the Dunn County Public Calendar. The memo in brief says, quote, Federal Code 1522 requires the federal government to consult with state and local governments, and there are local considerations for the availability of local resources. Notably, there is nothing in 1522 that allows a local government to have veto authority on resettlement. And I continue, this lack of veto authority has a firm basis in the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution's supremacy clause is that federal law is, quote, the supreme law of the land, unquote. Several executive orders and other laws that have tried to limit the number of refugees allowed or which grant veto authority to local governments have been struck down as unconstitutional. I also consulted with the Eau Claire Corporation Corporation Council. Again, by way of background, a resolution on December 23rd, 2023, before the Eau Claire Board, mandating that an economic impact study be conducted before any refugee resettlement in Eau Claire County failed on a vote of 18-9. Corporation Council there cited the same federal code and case law cited by Ms. Fagan, noting that the federal law had to consult with the local government and may receive funding from the federal government for services provided. The conclusion, and I quote, is the county's authority is limited with the ultimate decision to resettle refugees being left to the federal government. Her opinion also noted that counties do have authority to issue moratoriums, although by Wisconsin statute 59.69 sub 4 and 66.1002 sub 2 are limited to zoning issues. In our discussion on November 21st, a question was raised if I had consulted with other corporation councils where refugee-related issues were considered. I think the presumption there being that the federal code and case law outlined would have been differently interpreted. My answer that evening was that I had not, nor was I aware that Chair McCullough had done so. Subsequently, however, I've reviewed a statement from Heather Amos, Corporation Counsel in St. Croix County, saying that their actions are purely symbolic. And again, I quote, refugees could be resettled in Eau Claire tomorrow, and this resolution would not have any teeth to do anything about it. A question was also raised about whether these issues of refugee resettlement would be more appropriately addressed by a referendum. You do have a memorandum from Assistant Corporation Counsel Barbara Fagan in your packet, which states, quote, the county cannot bring a referendum to the ballot on the refugee resettlement issue. Under Wisconsin statute section 59.52 sub 25, the board may not conduct a referendum for advisory purposes. This was state law in response to our Medicare for All referendum, which was the last one passed in Wisconsin. And finally, a question was asked about pursuing a resolution here in the county. And the answer there is yes, a resolution could come forward. It can come forward as a resolution from one of the supervisors proposing specific language and asking that the resolution come before the county board. As the supremacy clause limits the ability of local governments to curtail the action of the federal government, any resolution brought to the county board attempting to restrict the federal government in structuring resettlements would not be binding. And that's both the conclusion to our meeting and the steps, a couple of subsequent steps that the Health and Human Services Board has taken.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse.
Welcome.
Supervisor Hagan.
I wish I was a little bit more prepared for this, so pardon me if I speak out of turn, but since we had our meeting earlier this year, 2025, I do believe some actions were taken at the federal level to limit funding for refugee resettlement, in which case making any resolutions, I believe, would be kind of moot because I think all of those actions have been paused. That is just what I had inferred from what I had understood. And if I'm mistaken on that, I apologize.
I believe that you're correct, Supervisor Hagan.
And I don't know the answer to that, but there were two subsequent cases related to executive orders pausing or granting local authorities veto authority, and both were declared unconstitutional.
All right. Consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. Item A, 2025 budget adjustment, Health Department and CJC. This is going to be a little bit different than the way we've done this in the past. You have the material in front of you. Does anyone need any clarification? All right, then I would need a motion and a second. Again, you have it in front of you, Supervisor Steen, Supervisor Morehouse. All right. Is there any debate? All right. You have the motion in front of you. One more request for debate. Supervisor Steen. Oh, sorry. All right. This is an adjustment, so it is, of course, a roll call vote. If you are all ready, you have the motion before you. Cast your votes.
While the supervisors present are using their touchscreens, the supervisors who are joining us online, I will go through. I believe we lost Supervisor Breslin.
His battery was fading, so he is excused if he is no longer with us.
Okay. Supervisor Calabrese.
Yes.
Supervisor Calabrese votes yes. Supervisor Vogel.
Yes.
Supervisor Vogel votes yes. But that has earned enough votes.
We're still waiting on three of you.
Supervisor Lawfer, Supervisor Gary Bjork, and Supervisor Lyon.
There we go.
Did you get it, Supervisor?
Oh, Supervisor.
Oh, God, sorry, Supervisor Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Supervisor Lauper, if you're having technical difficulties, you can certainly give us a.
Supervisor Lauper, how would you vote? Perfect, thank you so much.
Motion passes. 11B, budget adjustment, administration contract with Tyler Technologies. This is the discussion item we had earlier about the AI firm that will hopefully give us a much better, well, assuming you all pass this, let me rephrase that, will give us a much better inventory of our programs. You have the item before you. Does anyone need any more clarification? Sure, Supervisor Gilbert. Hang on a second. There we go.
Has there been any looking into other firms that offer these same services, not questioning the validity of the service, but the provider itself? Sorry.
My sense of the thing is that there is nobody else with a comparable database offering the same services.
Okay. Just seems strange, and if it's that good of an idea.
Well, it's right at the very cutting edge of the AI technology. Okay. So it's basically the first firm to adopt the technology. It is possible that there's someone else, but I am not aware of it.
Well, in a brief search of that company, the first thing that came up was a trading view, which is a oversight of such things. But apparently this Tyler Technologies just filed their 10K, Form 10K report. And their number one downfall was cybersecurity threat. And I just didn't know if there was other options or if that was related to their recently switching over to cloud-based instead of their internal proprietary database. But I just didn't know, since the first thing I found was if we're going to give them all of our information, if there was any other shopping around done on the subject.
Chris?
What I would say is anything that they receive is all public record anyway.
And that's fair enough. I just didn't know if there was any other services, not questioning what they do, but who's doing it.
Yep. So the kind of the core to the priority-based budgeting is relatively new to Tyler. It was actually a standalone company for, I want to say 20-ish years. And they have been in the priority-based budgeting business for a little bit more than a decade. I want to say 12 years maybe. But they were purchased or acquired by Tyler roughly a year ago. So to the best of my knowledge and from the various, trainings and presentations that we've been to, I'm not aware of anyone else that's doing what they're doing on the government level.
That will change and there will be a much more competitive process going forward, but at the moment, this is sort of the bleeding edge of the technology. Any other clarifications?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Absolutely.
Thank you. In the resolution, it says that the process is called priority-based budgeting, and the one-time cost of the software for 2025 is $57,600. During the presentation at executive committee, I know that the fellow giving the presentation had mentioned subsequent years and how some municipalities, counties have taken some years in the process. Do we know what the cost will be in subsequent years?
Currently, we do not have plans for follow-up years. If we adopt this resolution and we get the database and we find it useful, then there will be discussion, I presume, with the next budget cycle of whether we will continue on. But at the moment, we are just planning on the 1 year.
Thank you.
Supervisor Story.
Point of order. Did we do a motion?
We are still in clarification.
That might sounded kind of like debate to me.
Well, I mean, it was requests for data. So does anyone else need any more clarification on what you're going to be voting on? Okay, you have the motion before you. I need a motion in a second. Supervisor Bashand moves. Supervisor Hagan seconds. All right, now we're into the debate phase. Thank you, Supervisor Story. So, does anyone have any speaking to the resolution? Supervisor Vandermeulen.
Go ahead and buy this, or is that what the motion is?
Yeah, this would be a budget adjustment that allows us to purchase this software for this year.
I'd still like to know what department heads think of this before we buy it.
Thank you, Supervisor Vandermeulen. Supervisor Steen.
Yes, I think I was the one that made the motion to send it on with the caveat that we spend up to this amount, not, and I think my question to Mr. Dunbar was that a firm figure, or it could be less than this?
Dan? It's a firm figure. That's what Dan's saying.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, you have the motion before you. One last option for debate. Seeing none, we will now cast our vote. It is a budget adjustment, so it is a roll call vote.
As the supervisors present in the room are voting, I'll go through the online participants. Supervisor Calabrese, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Calabrese votes yes. Supervisor Vogel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Vogel votes yes. Supervisor Wolf, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Wolf votes yes. Waiting on three more. Supervisor Laffer? Oh, did you? Okay.
It is not showing again, so. Oh, there we got it. Supervisor Morehouse, you're. All right, there we go.
That passes. That 19-5, that passes.
All right, motion passes. Okay, that's 11, 12, consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees, Committee on Administration, resolution revising the inventory of job classification. Does anyone need any clarification on the motion before you? All right. I would need a motion in a second. Supervisor Story? Supervisor Headland? All right, is there any speaking to the resolution? All right. Seeing none, one more time. Any speaking to the resolution? We are ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. That is the last of our action items. Our next meeting will be March 19th, 2025. Any announcements? I don't have any.
I have,
I do have one. Y'all have mailboxes over here in the mailroom, and they are filling up. And,
not anymore. They're all on their supervisors' spots. But please be sure to make sure that some magical mail fairy did it. But make sure that you do check your mailboxes pretty frequently. Also, if you have your per diems, I will take those. We are quite low on the Sunshine Fund. We are down to $3 in the Sunshine Fund. So unless you all want to survive off of Supervisor Steen's mints for the next meeting, feel free to pony up for some treats. In addition, I do want to draw your attention. The Red Cedar Watershed Conference is coming up on March 13th. That is a conference that typically many of the supervisors have gone to and found informative. So I'm going to leave these here. If you're interested in attending the Red Cedar Watershed Conference, let me know and we will get you signed up for that particular conference.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.